moment you turned 30, the rules changed. Not officially, not on paper, but in reality. The door closed behind you and no one told you there was another entrance. You didn't fail. You didn't slow down. You didn't suddenly lose discipline or intelligence. What happened is far more unsettling. You kept playing a game that stops paying out after 30. And the men who keep winning, they stopped following the rules you still believe in. Pause for a second. Ask yourself this quietly. If hard work alone made people rich, why are the hardest working men you know exhausted, anxious and stuck? That question should make you uncomfortable, because once you see the answer, you can't unsee it. The lie that activates at 30. Here's the part no one says out loud. Before 30, effort still works. You can climb. You can be noticed. You can be rewarded. After 30, effort without leverage becomes invisible. You're no longer evaluated on how hard you try. You're evaluated on how useful you are to power. And that's where most men break. They double down on honesty. They double down on loyalty. They double down on being a good guy. They think morality is a strategy. It's not. Morality is a story told to people who are meant to serve, not decide. Machiavelli saw this centuries ago, not as cynicism, but as diagnosis. He understood something modern men are never taught. Power does not respond to sincerity. Power responds to structure. And after 30, the system stops rewarding sincerity. A man named Elias, and why his life stalled. Let me tell you about a man named Elias. Elias did everything right. No shortcuts, no scandals, no reckless risks. He worked long hours, saved aggressively, stayed loyal to institutions that promised stability. At 32, he realized something terrifying. He was replaceable, not because he lacked skill, but because he lacked position. You see, Elias was valuable, but not dangerous. He contributed, but he didn't control. He complied, but he didn't influence. He waited, but he didn't move the board. Meanwhile, men less competent than him advanced faster, not because they were smarter, but because they understood the architecture of power. That's when Elias felt the ground shift beneath him. And that shift happens to every man after 30. The question is whether you adapt or moralize your own stagnation. The invisible line, you cross after 30. Here's the brutal truth most motivational videos won't tell you. After 30, society stops investing in your potential. It only rewards your leverage. No one asks, how hard does he work? They ask, what does he control? Resources, access, attention, risk, narrative. These are the currencies of wealth, not effort. Machiavelli would call this the difference between virtue and fortune. Virtue is not virtue, it is strategic force, the ability to shape outcomes instead of reacting to them. And men who lack it are kept busy, very busy. So busy they never notice the ceiling. Why playing fair becomes a trap. Play fair sounds noble, but fair to who? Fair assumes equal starting positions. Fair assumes neutral rules. Fair assumes the referee isn't invested. After 30, fairness becomes a leash, because the men at the top don't break rules loudly. They rewrite incentives quietly. They outsource risk. They delegate blame. They moralize obedience. And they reward men who understand one thing, appear ethical, operate strategically. That sentence should unsettle you. Good. It's supposed to. The first crack in the old belief system. Here's the moment this video becomes dangerous for you and for the system that profits from your obedience. If wealth were moral, the most moral men would be the richest. They're not. If effort were decisive, manual laborers would dominate the Forbes list. They don't. If patience were rewarded, the patient wouldn't be watching reckless men pass them by. But they are. So what's really happening? You're not failing. You're being managed. And Machiavelli would tell you this calmly without judgment. The man who refuses to learn power becomes subject to it. What this series is really about. This is not a get-rich-quick fantasy. This is not about scams, hype, or delusion. This is about waking up after 30 and realizing you must stop being admirable and start being effective. Over the next parts, we're going to dismantle the 7 Machiavellian laws of wealth, not as cruelty, not as evil, but as clarity. Because once you see the game for what it is, you have 2 choices. Keep playing fair and stay small, or learn the rules no one teaches and step into leverage. And the first rule. It's the one that destroys most men's self-image, because it requires letting go of a lie you've carried your entire adult life. And that's where we go next. The first Machiavellian law of wealth doesn't sound dark. It sounds offensive because the moment you accept it, you can no longer see yourself as just unlucky. And most men would rather believe in bad luck than take responsibility for power. Law number 1, never build value you don't control. This is where the illusion shatters. You were taught to be valuable, to develop skills, to become indispensable, to work so hard they can't ignore you. That advice quietly ruins men after 30, because Machiavelli understood something brutal. Value without control makes you exploitable. The more valuable you are inside someone else's system, the harder it is for you to leave it. You don't gain leverage. You gain dependency. And dependency feels safe. Until you try to move. The man who became too good at his job. Let me introduce Marcus. Marcus was exceptional, not average, not decent, exceptional. He solved problems no one else could. Stayed late when others left, saved entire projects. At 35, he expected promotion. At 36, he trained his own manager. At 37, he realized the truth. They couldn't replace him, so they wouldn't promote him. Marcus wasn't an asset. He was infrastructure. And infrastructure never gets equity. It gets maintenance. That's the moment men either wake up or double down on loyalty and disappear quietly. Why effort stops translating into money. Here's the uncomfortable pivot. Effort increases output. Control increases ownership. And ownership is where money obeys. After 30, the game shifts from how much can you do to how many outcomes move because of you. If your absence doesn't change the system, you don't have leverage. Machiavelli warned rulers about this exact trap. He said a prince who relies solely on ability without position will be undone by those who command structure. Modern translation? If you don't control the frame, your talent serves someone who does. The moral trap that keeps men small. Here's where most men panic. They hear this law and say, so I should stop being ethical? No, that's not what this is. Machiavelli never argued against ethics. He argued against naive ethics. There's a difference between being honorable and being harmless. One earns respect. The other invites extraction. You can be ethical and strategic, but the system teaches you a false choice, so you choose weakness and call it virtue. That's not morality, that's conditioning. Why the rich teach this quietly to their sons? Notice something interesting. The wealthy don't tell their sons, just work hard and hope. They teach them equity, positioning, optionality, influence. They teach them how to own outcomes, not chase approval. Meanwhile, everyone else is taught patience. Patience is not a virtue when the rules are asymmetric. It's a delay tactic. And the longer you wait, the more expensive leverage becomes. The internal resistance you're feeling right now. If this part made you uneasy, that's not an accident. Because this law attacks identity. It challenges the belief that being useful is enough, that being good will eventually be seen, that fairness will correct itself. It won't. Systems reward what they are designed to reward, and this one rewards control. The men who rise aren't always smarter, they're positioned. And positioning is a choice, but only once you stop mistaking comfort for safety. The turning point. Here's the real question you should be asking yourself now. What do I create that I don't own? What outcomes depend on me, but don't benefit me? Where am I valuable but powerless? Because once you identify that, you'll feel something dangerous. Clarity. And clarity is the enemy of stagnation. In the next part, we're going deeper into the second Machiavellian law. This one explains why being liked is far more dangerous than being respected, and why men who chase approval rarely touch real money. Most people never recover from this realization, but those who do, they never see the world the same way again. If you are widely liked after 30, you should be worried, because money does not follow affection. It follows authority, and authority always offends someone. That discomfort you feel right now, that's the sound of a belief cracking. Law number 2, respect pays. Approval bleeds you dry. This is the law that ends careers quietly. You were trained to be agreeable, to smooth friction, to keep everyone comfortable, to avoid conflict because connections matter. After 30, that instinct becomes lethal. Machiavelli understood this with ruthless clarity. Men who seek to be loved become dependent on moods they cannot control. Men who command respect shape outcomes, even in silence. Approval is unstable, respect is structural. The likability trap. Let me tell you about Daniel. Daniel was everyone's favorite. Clients loved him. Colleagues trusted him. Leadership praised his attitude. He was always the bridge, always the fixer, always the one asked to smooth things over. At 34, Daniel noticed something strange. Every important decision happened without him. He was consulted, but never decisive. Praised, but never promoted. Why? Because people liked him, but they didn't need him. And money flows to necessity, not niceness. Why approval is the most expensive addiction. Approval feels good. It releases relief. It quiets anxiety. But here's the hidden cost. When you crave approval, you begin negotiating your boundaries in advance. You soften your stance before it's challenged. You explain instead of decide. You justify instead of enforce. Machiavelli would call this fatal softness, not because it's immoral, but because it broadcasts weak leverage. The moment people sense you fear disapproval, they know exactly how to extract concessions from you. The silent math of power. After 30, people don't ask, "Is he kind?" They ask, subconsciously, "Will this man hold his line under pressure?" Respect comes from consistency under tension, from decisions that don't bend to comfort, from boundaries that cost you popularity. That's why the men who rise often appear cold, not because they lack empathy, but because they refuse to auction their authority, and authority is what capital responds to. Why being nice keeps you poor. Here's the part most motivational content avoids. Niceness is often fear in disguise, fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood. But markets don't reward emotional safety. They reward clarity, clear terms, clear stakes, clear consequences. Machiavelli warned that rulers who try to please everyone lose control of everything. Modern translation: if you try to be universally liked, you become universally manageable. The moment approval became your cage. Think back. When was the last time you withheld a hard truth because it might upset someone? When did you accept a bad deal to keep the relationship? When did you say yes because saying no felt risky? Those moments didn't feel dramatic. They felt reasonable. That's how power leaks. Quietly, politely, repeatedly. And after 30, those leaks compound. The shift that changes everything. Respect does not require cruelty. It requires self-trust. It requires deciding before negotiating, setting terms before asking permission, letting outcomes fall where they may. This terrifies men conditioned to equate goodness with agreement. But Machiavelli would say this plainly: a man who cannot risk being disliked cannot command outcomes, and outcomes, not intentions, create wealth. The price of crossing this line. Once you stop chasing approval, something strange happens. Some people pull away, some test you, some resist. That's not failure, that's recalibration. Because the system is now reassessing your weight. And in the next part, we're confronting the third law, the one that explains why waiting your turn is the fastest way to miss it entirely. This is where patience turns from virtue into sabotage. Most men never recover from this realization. The ones who do, they stop waiting and start moving the board. Every year you wait, someone bolder passes you. Not smarter, not better, just earlier. And once you understand why waiting is rewarded with nothing, you'll never be patient the same way again. Law number 3, fortune favors the aggressor, not the prepared. This law offends disciplined men. Because you were taught this lie, wait your turn. Be patient, your time will come. After 30, that advice becomes a sedative. Machiavelli saw this clearly. He wrote that fortune is like a river, calm for long stretches, then violent without warning. And when it floods, only those already moving shape the outcome. The patient drown, the decisive build canals. The man who was always almost ready, meet Adrian. Adrian was cautious, calculated, always preparing. He read every book, researched every angle, waited for perfect timing. At 33, he said, "One more year, then I'll move." At 36, the opportunity he studied for years was taken by someone less informed but faster. That man didn't know more, he moved sooner. and Adrian learned a brutal lesson too late. Readiness without action has no market value. Why being ready is a comfort strategy. Let's be honest, preparation feels productive. It gives the illusion of progress without exposure. You can plan without risk, research without judgment, improve privately without consequence. But Machiavelli warned against this illusion. He believed hesitation invites domination, because while you're perfecting your approach, someone else is claiming territory. And territory, psychological, financial, social, is rarely handed back. The hidden cost of waiting after 30. Here's what waiting really costs you. Time-based credibility, first mover leverage, narrative control, risk tolerance. After 30, risk tolerance drops. Not because you're weaker, but because you've accumulated responsibilities. That makes delay feel rational. But the system doesn't reward rational hesitation. It rewards committed motion. Machiavelli would say, "Those who rely on time to solve problems surrender power to chance, and chance favors the bold." Why aggression isn't recklessness. This is where men misunderstand Machiavelli. Aggression is not chaos, it's initiative under uncertainty. It means acting before certainty arrives, claiming position before consensus forms, forcing reality to respond to you. The men who rise don't wait for permission. They wait for resistance, and resistance tells them where power actually lives. The moment you realize you've been delayed on purpose. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Systems benefit from your patience. Your employer benefits from your loyalty. Markets benefit from your hesitation. Institutions benefit from your obedience. Waiting keeps you predictable. Predictability keeps you controllable. Machiavelli understood this dynamic in rulers and subjects. Today, it exists between builders and institutions. The man who moves early disrupts plans. The man who waits fits neatly into them. The internal alarm, you're feeling right now. If this part is making you anxious, good, because anxiety is clarity colliding with conditioning. You're realizing how many times you delayed because it felt responsible. How often you mistook fear for prudence. How often one more year quietly became 5. And here's the truth. No one says plainly. There is no moment when risk disappears. There is only a moment when opportunity does. The shift that separates builders from bystanders. After 30, wealth is built by men who move with incomplete information. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose themselves. They don't ask if it's safe. They ask if delay is fatal. Machiavelli didn't admire recklessness. He admired timing. And timing belongs to those already in motion. What comes next changes everything in the next part. We confront the fourth law, the one most men refuse to accept. It explains why transparency is praised publicly, but punished privately, why revealing your plans weakens you, and why silence becomes one of the most profitable strategies after 30. Once you understand this law, you'll stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from your clarity. And when that happens, power begins to reorganize around you. The moment you explain yourself, you give something away. Not clarity, not trust, power, and most men donate it daily, without realizing it's the most expensive habit they have. Law number 4, silence multiplies power, transparency dilutes it. This law feels wrong at first. You were taught that transparency builds trust, that openness signals confidence, that explaining your intentions makes you respectable. After 30, that belief becomes a liability. Machiavelli warned that a man who reveals his strategy invites interference, not because others are evil, but because information creates leverage, and leverage is never neutral. The man who talked himself out of power, meet Nathan. Nathan believed in openness. He shared plans early. He explained reasoning. He kept nothing hidden. He thought clarity would align people. Instead, it armed them. Colleagues preempted his moves. Competitors adjusted faster. Superiors redirected his ideas before he could claim them. At 38, Nathan realized something brutal. The more he explained, the less he controlled outcomes. He wasn't transparent. He was exposed. Why silence feels uncomfortable, but works. Silence creates uncertainty. Uncertainty forces attention. When you speak less, people speculate more. They watch, they adjust, they hesitate. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. A ruler who speaks too much invites negotiation. A ruler who speaks little forces interpretation. And interpretation always favors the man who holds position. The false promise of being understood. Most men don't explain themselves to clarify. They explain to be accepted. That's the trap. The desire to be understood often masks fear of misinterpretation. But misinterpretation is not danger. It's flexibility. When people don't fully understand your intentions, they cannot easily counter them. Clarity feels honest. Ambiguity feels powerful. After 30, power outperforms honesty. Why the system rewards loudness, but pays quietly. Notice something strange. Publicly, the system praises openness. Privately, it rewards discretion. Men who announce plans invite feedback. Men who move quietly deliver results, and results silence questions. Machiavelli would say, "A man who reveals his path allows others to place obstacles in advance." The silent man meets resistance only after he has momentum. The strategic use of withholding. This is not about lying, it's about timing. You don't owe everyone access to your thinking. You don't owe explanations to people without stake. You don't owe transparency before leverage is secured. Withholding information is not deception, it's positioning, and positioning determines outcomes. The moment you stop over-explaining, think carefully. How often do you justify decisions that need no defense? How often do you announce moves before they're locked in? How often do you explain boundaries instead of enforcing them? Each explanation trains others where your limits are. Silence keeps limits undefined, and undefined limits are harder to cross. What happens when you go quiet, when you speak less? 3 things happen. Weak alliances dissolve. Opportunists reveal themselves. Serious players lean in. Silence filters the room. It separates curiosity from commitment, noise from influence. And after 30, influence, not popularity, creates wealth. The inner resistance, your feeling. This law challenges your self-image because it feels arrogant, detached, cold. But Machiavelli would remind you, power is not emotional comfort. It is outcome dominance. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You need to be effective where it counts. And the men who master silence are rarely surprised by opposition. The door. This law opens. Once you stop explaining, you start observing. You see who reacts nervously to your quiet, who fills the silence with demands, who suddenly feels entitled to your direction. Those reactions reveal power dynamics you were blind to before. And in the next part, we're confronting the 5th law, the one that exposes why loyalty is praised but punished when it interferes with self-interest. This law forces a decision most men avoid, until it's too late. Loyalty feels noble, until it costs you your future. And the moment you realize who truly benefits from your loyalty, everything changes. Law number 5, loyalty is a tool, not a virtue. This law cuts deep, because loyalty was sold to you as character, as identity, as proof that you're a good man. After 30, blind loyalty becomes an anchor. Machiavelli was precise here. A ruler values loyalty only while it serves power. The moment it doesn't, it's discarded. And men who confuse loyalty with strategy are always shocked when the favor is not returned. The man who stayed too long, meet Caleb. Caleb stayed. Through bad leadership, through shrinking budgets, through broken promises. He told himself consistency matters. Loyalty pays. They'll remember. At 40, the company restructured. Caleb was thanked, praised, released. No malice, no ceremony, just efficiency. That's when he understood the truth no one warns you about. Institutions don't betray loyalty. They outgrow it. Why loyalty is praised publicly and punished privately. Notice the language of power. Leaders praise loyalty because it stabilizes systems, but they reward results, not devotion. Machiavelli knew this. He warned rulers never to confuse affection with utility. Modern translation: your loyalty is valuable only while it increases someone else's leverage. Once it doesn't, it becomes irrelevant. The emotional trap. Here's where most men get stuck. They don't stay because it's strategic. They stay because leaving feels like betrayal. They internalize guilt. They moralize sacrifice. They delay their own ascent out of fear of appearing disloyal. That guilt is learned, and it keeps men stationary while others move. Strategic loyalty versus emotional loyalty. There is a difference. Strategic loyalty is conditional, it's reciprocal, it's reviewed. Emotional loyalty is permanent, it ignores outcomes, it demands self-erasure. Machiavelli would never advise permanent loyalty without leverage. Why? Because permanence without power invites exploitation. The moment loyalty becomes a cage. Ask yourself this honestly. If you left tomorrow, would your position be protected or replaced? If your contribution vanished, would outcomes stop or adapt? If the relationship ended, who would recover faster? Those answers tell you everything. Loyalty that isn't backed by leverage is faith in a system that does not share your values. Why the powerful never pledge blind allegiance? Watch closely. The wealthy diversify allegiance. They maintain options. They align interests, not emotions. They don't burn bridges loudly. They quietly build exits. That's not betrayal. That's insurance. And insurance is a form of power. The internal shift. You're resisting. This law creates resistance because it threatens identity. You may be thinking, so loyalty means nothing. No. It means loyalty must be earned continuously, by both sides. Machiavelli would say loyalty that cannot be renegotiated is submission, and submission never creates wealth. What happens when you reclaim optionality? When you stop pledging blind loyalty? You negotiate better, you move faster, you're treated with seriousness. Not opportunity, identity. Machiavelli understood that power demands a trade most men never complete. You must abandon the need to be morally validated by people who do not share your risk, and that loss feels like death. The last man who turned back. Meet Thomas. Thomas learned everything you've heard so far. He stopped over-explaining. He moved earlier. He controlled outcomes. He reduced visibility. His income rose. His leverage grew. His position stabilized. But something unexpected happened. People changed. Friends questioned him. Colleagues called him different. Family hinted he was becoming cold, arrogant, distant. And slowly Thomas began to hesitate. He softened decisions. He explained himself again. He made choices that looked right instead of choices that worked. And just like that, momentum leaked out. Not because he didn't know better, but because he wanted to be approved of again. Why this law is the hardest? Because it doesn't attack behavior. It attacks self-image. You were raised to believe that being misunderstood means you're wrong, that friction means failure, that isolation means arrogance. Machiavelli would call that conditioning. He believed the most dangerous moment for a rising man is when the crowd no longer recognizes him, because the instinct is to turn back. The silent tax of being liked. Here's what approval secretly costs you after 30. Slower decisions, safer positioning, weaker boundaries, diluted leverage. Every time you choose acceptance over effectiveness, you pay compound interest on regret. The men who cross into real wealth don't become cruel, they become unavailable for consensus. Why the crowd always arrives late? Understand this clearly. The crowd only applauds after outcomes are undeniable. Before that, they criticize, they question, they moralize. Machiavelli observed that the same people who condemn you during ascent will praise you during stability, without ever acknowledging their doubt. If you wait for permission, you will wait forever. The moment you step into the unknown. This law requires one decision: to be comfortable being misinterpreted in the short term for the sake of sovereignty in the long term. That means letting people guess wrong, letting silence replace explanation, letting outcomes speak later. This is where most men stop, not because they can't go further, but because the loneliness feels too sharp. The truth about loneliness and power. Loneliness is not a sign you're wrong, it's a sign you've exited the crowd. Every meaningful increase in power reduces relatability. That's not tragedy, that's geometry. The higher you climb, the fewer people share the view. Machiavelli never promised comfort, he promised control. The final reframe. This entire video was never about money. Money is a symptom of leverage, of timing, of silence, of controlled loyalty, of strategic invisibility, of decisive action, of emotional independence. After 30, wealth is not earned, it is designed, and design requires detachment. The question that ends this series. Ask yourself this, honestly. Do I want to be admired, or do I want to be free? Because after 30, you rarely get both. The men who stay fair remain understandable. The men who get rich accept misinterpretation. Machiavelli would leave you with this truth. The price of power is not corruption, it is distance. And only you can decide if that price is worth paying. You stop being taken for granted. Optionality changes how people perceive your value, because men with options are respected, even when they say nothing. The line you cross. Here. This is the moment you stop tying your future to promises you don't control. You begin asking different questions. You stop confusing gratitude with obligation. You start designing exits, not threats, but freedom, and freedom is leverage. What comes next is uncomfortable, but necessary. In the next part, we confront the sixth law, the one most men refuse to accept. It explains why visibility is dangerous, why being seen invites attack, and why real wealth is built quietly, before anyone realizes you've arrived. This law separates those who accumulate power from those who announce it too early, and once you see it, you'll understand why so many men sabotage themselves at the finish line. The fastest way to become a target is to let people see how far ahead you are. Most men don't lose because they fail. They lose because they are noticed too early. Law number 6. Visibility attracts enemies before it attracts protection. This law feels counterintuitive in the age of social media. You were told to build a personal brand, to document the journey, to show your wins, to be visible. After 30, visibility becomes a risk multiplier. Machiavelli warned that power exposed too early invites coalitions against it, not out of hatred, but out of fear, and fear organizes faster than admiration. The man who announced his rise, meet Julian. Julian started winning quietly. Deals closed, influence grew, momentum built. Then he started posting wins, numbers, signals of success. Within months, resistance appeared. Partners renegotiated, competitors accelerated attacks. Old allies questioned his intentions. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just pressure from all directions. Julian hadn't failed. He had signaled too soon. Why power must mature before it's seen. Power is fragile in its early stages, before systems form around it, before alliances solidify, before leverage is defended. Visibility exposes incomplete structures. Machiavelli believed that a ruler should appear powerful only when power is secure. Before that, movement must be quiet, because unfinished power invites correction. The illusion of being seen. Men confuse visibility with progress. Likes feel like momentum, attention feels like validation, recognition feels like arrival, but attention doesn't defend you, it measures you, and measurement invites competition. After 30, competition doesn't play fair, it plays preemptive. Why quiet men accumulate faster? Quiet men move without interference. They test ideas without sabotage. They build leverage without scrutiny. They correct mistakes without public cost. By the time they're noticed, they're already insulated. Machiavelli would say, a man revealed too early must fight before he is ready, and fighting early drains resources. The dangerous comfort of applause. Applause seduces disciplined men. It feels earned. It feels affirming. It feels safe. But applause creates expectation. Expectation creates pressure. Pressure forces decisions before leverage matures. That's why so many men peak publicly and stall privately. The strategic use of invisibility and visibility is not weakness. It's incubation. You move, you build, you position, without commentary, without defense, without noise. Silence becomes camouflage, and camouflage buys time, the internal conflict. This creates this law attacks ego, because part of you wants recognition, wants proof, wants confirmation that the sacrifice is worth it. Machiavelli would warn you. The need to be seen is often the need to be reassured, and reassurance has no strategic value. When visibility finally becomes safe, visibility is not forbidden, it's timed. You reveal strength only when retaliation is irrelevant. You show results only when position is locked. You speak only when silence has already done its work. By then, opposition is expensive, and expensive opposition rarely forms. The moment before the final law. If you followed this far, you should feel a shift. You're seeing wealth not as hustle, but as architecture: control, respect, timing, silence, optionality, invisibility. One law remains, and this final law explains why some men, even after learning all of this, still never cross the line into true wealth. Because this law requires the most difficult sacrifice of all. In the final part, we reveal it, and once you hear it, you'll understand why most men stop right before the finish. Most men don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they refuse to let go of the version of themselves that the system applauds. And that refusal is the most expensive mistake after 30. Law number 7, you must be willing to be misunderstood. This is the final barrier, not money, not intelligence,